Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week, what more can pro basketball star Brittney Griner put up with? Busted for hash oil, 10 months in a Russian jail, a mother and vocal supporter for the LGBTQ community, she was scheduled to be the keynote speaker at the Women Grow Educational Leadership Conference in Baltimore. But after checking into the Gaylord Hotel, she was greeted by this message scribbled on duct tape. Shaken by what is being called an anime meme, Brittney checked out.
Let me be clear about this. BG's not the only woman under attack. We all are, like literally.
Meanwhile, in the last week, 2 Americans were returned to the U.S. after cannabis-related airport busts. Last week, it was teacher Mark Fogel, who spent 4 years in a Russian jail. And this past week, a 28-year-old man from Ohio named Caleb Byers was busted with edible-infused jam. 10 days later, he was back home in the United States. And the number one state in revenue, California, continues to fail, with inactive licenses now outnumbering active ones. The big winners? The illicit market. Dina Nagib reports from the Golden State. And New York Governor Kathy Hochul wants to allow law enforcement officers to use the smell of cannabis as a reason to stop and suspect DUI drivers, while her state opens up their 300th dispensary. And could Switzerland be the first fully legal adult use country in Europe by next year? Our European correspondent Ben Stevens has that story and more from coast to coast to Canada. Cannabis coverage on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCMTV Productions' weekly roundup of cannabis news from the U.S., Canada, and now Europe. I'm Alaina Pinto. Okay, have you downloaded our PCMTV app yet? It is free and available in the App Store. I say this every week. It's also available in Google Play, or you can search, and by searching the QR code that's on your screen, you'll find it too. Just search for PCMTV if you are doing that in the App Store. Okay, first up, a disturbing story about the stigma and hate that many in the cannabis industry face every day. Last week, we interviewed the CEO of the Women Grow Educational Leadership Conference in Baltimore, Maryland, Dr. Shonda Macias. She was excited about the 2-day event her organization was hosting, and she was excited to welcome WNBA All Star and Olympic gold medalist Brittney Griner as the keynote speaker, along with former NFL player Ricky Willliams. The event was held at the Gaylord Hotel and Conference Center in the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. But when Brittney checked into her room, she was shaken to her core when she walked into her bathroom and found this message on a piece of duct tape: "Gay baby jail." Griner is an outspoken advocate for gay rights, a mother, and had a harrowing 10 months in a Russian jail. Griner pulled out of her speaking engagement with the support of the CEO of Women Grow, Dr. Macias. And last Friday, Dr. Macias talked with PCM founder Jimmy Young about the conference and the incident with Griner.
When did you find out that Brittney had this incident, and how was that communicated to you, and how quickly did it evolve into she's not going to be able to speak because she's so upset?
Well, it was a little bit more complicated than that, Jimmy. There was a lot going on during the conference, and I decided that when I was briefed on the situation, that I was going to support BG in anything she decided to do. And let me be clear about this. BG's not the only woman under attack. We all are, like literally. And when something happens to one of us, it does impact all of us. And the conference was a reminder of how women that come together and show strength in numbers with one uniform voice can truly make an impact. She was our keynote because she's the beacon of hope to us.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, she just inspires us all. I mean, you could try to find a way to be divisive or to try to separate us on our different values, but the truth is that when you represent hope and love and all the things, we want to know how we can continue that messaging. And it's just one of those moments where you have to say that women are under attack and we need to protect each other. We need to move forward in a uniform voice, and we need to be the agents of change.
There is some explanation that is being spun by reports out of Baltimore that Stay Gay Baby Jail is related to the anime community and is a gaming term. But whatever was the intent of the saying, the fact remains the message really upset Brittney. She's reportedly fine, though, at home now with her family. And this week, Russia announced that another American, 28-year-old Caleb Byers, was released after getting busted at the same Moscow airport that teacher Mark Fogel and Griner were busted at. 28-year-old Byers had been detained since February 7th and is now back in the U.S. Byers allegedly held infused marmalade or another form of edibles in his bags. There is some speculation by international reporters that this suddenly softening of the Russian-American relationship might have something to do with the efforts to end the war in Ukraine. However, because negotiations are at a critical stage, no one is willing to go on the record with that connection. Now let's start our state reports in California with Dina Nagib, who tells us that there are now more failed cannabis businesses than current licensed ones in her state. Here's Dina.
I'm Dina Nagib, Principal Consultant at Grass Goddess Consulting, here to give you the latest developments in California for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. According to the Department of Cannabis Control's website, there are now 10,828 inactive and surrendered licenses in the state and only 8,514 active ones. The vast majority of the inactive licenses are related to growing cannabis, with over 7,100 inactive cultivation licenses. This is a sad milestone for California's hurting legal market, which now has only a fraction of operators compared with California's medical market that existed prior to legalization. A white paper out of Southern California explored the contents of 104 hemp products from 68 brands. The analysis found that almost all of the products contained synthetic cannabinoids and exceeded the federal hemp THC limits. In addition, more than half the products failed California hemp standards. The governor banned these products with emergency regulations last year, but the ban has been largely ignored, and these products are still widely available and not subject to the same testing requirements as the cannabis industry. That's it for California. I'm Dina Nagib for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Back on the East Coast in the state of New York, the cannabis industry continues to evolve. Now that state's Attorney General, Letitia James, has won a $6 million civil court judgment against an unlicensed cannabis shop in Brooklyn. This is considered a major win in combating the out-of-control illicit cannabis market in that state. On top of that, the governor wants a bill that would allow the smell of weed in a car to be just cause for law enforcement to test a driver under the influence. Plus, the state passed a milestone with 300 total dispensaries now open. Here's Pam Chmiel with these stories and more in New York.
This is Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Pam Chmiel reporting from New York. Cannabis odor as evidence? New York Governor Hochul is pushing for police officers to use the smell of cannabis as evidence in drugged driving cases. Cassie White, a spokesperson for Hochul, told Spectrum News the administration is actively negotiating with the state legislature to keep New Yorkers safe from drugged driving while also maintaining their social equity goals. However, New York cannabis consultant Kaylin Castetter warns that those who work in the industry often leave their shifts smelling of cannabis because of its pungency. And Leaf Brands is coming to New York. Leaf Brands, a leading California-based extraction and manufacturing company, just made its first move as a multi-state operator by entering the New York cannabis market. Known for its distillate, hydrocarbon, and solventless extractions, Leaf has secured a 7,000 square foot facility in upstate New York and plans to start operations soon as part of their national expansion strategy. And New York continues to crack down on illegal shops. The New York Attorney General, Letitia James, just issued a $6 million judgment against a Brooklyn smoke shop for repeatedly ignoring orders from the Office of Cannabis Management and Enforcement to seize unlicensed operations. Meanwhile, a previous attempt to shut down an illegal cannabis shop in Queens was ruled unconstitutional by a judge last October. But if a shop is operating without a license, how unconstitutional is it really? That's this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Pam Chmiel, reporting from New York.
Lots of action in state legislatures as states begin to challenge existing laws and make new ones. First up, in the Big Sky of Montana, where a Republican senator is trying to get adult use consumers to have to pay $200 for the right to purchase cannabis for recreational purposes. Plus, that state wants to record all transactions and the people who are making them. Kind of creepy, maybe? I mean, anyone who's visited a dispensary knows that security cameras are recording inside the store, but why does the state have to access that video when you already have to get your license or ID scanned when you check in? So the information is already recorded. But if you are a pro-cannabis consumer, you probably don't want to visit Idaho anytime soon. A bill is advancing in that state's legislature to set a minimum fine of $300 for possession of a small amount of cannabis product. It's still a misdemeanor, but that fine is a little excessive, right? $300. But it's a win for democracy in South Dakota. Cannabis advocates there passed a bill for their medical program a few years ago with a 70% approval. But Republicans in that state's Congress was trying to overturn that vote. A vote this week of 7-6 narrowly defeated that bill to overturn the vote and allow the medical cannabis program to continue to serve the 13,000 patients they serve in that state. No state medical program has ever been shut down by any legislation, and there are now 39 active in the United States. Meanwhile, Illinois' market continues to evolve, and that's why we look forward to hearing from Mark Allen, our Chicago clone guy from his state of Illinois. Here's Mark.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, reporting from Illinois for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Thanks for tuning in. This is Bird, hanging out like he's always doing. I love this guy. Chicago City Hall had a hemp hearing recently, and I watched that, and it was exciting. The CBAI, the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois, was there representing all the commercial craft growers, all the big business, while certain people, and actually Rod Knight, a cannabis hemp lawyer, was clarifying things for the local hemp people. So at the end of that, I think people are still divided and possibly even more confused, but I enjoyed watching it because it's going in the right direction. So that was very interesting. You can go on YouTube and look for that. That was pretty interesting. More state bills coming in. These politicians here are coming in hot this year. State Bill 1772 is going to help on-premise cannabis consumption. It's going to allow businesses to get a permit to have open consumption. So we're used to events and roller coaster rides and events and carnivals where there's a beer tent. They have to get a license for that alcohol consumption. Well, now the same is going to go for the cannabis, the flower. So a lot of places in the state now, it's going to be easier to get a license to have outdoor and indoor consumption of cannabis, which makes sense because you can smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol everywhere. So now you can They were talking about doing that with cannabis, which is pretty cool. Love hearing that coming through. That's also going to establish ventilation requirements for like indoor establishments. Another state bill coming through is 1775, which I particularly really like. This is in regards to hemp regulation reform. It's an amendment to the Illinois Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Simply put, it states that any product sold shall not be considered adulterated if it contains legal hemp. But it also includes THC, cannabis, and everything else. So simply put, adulterated means not pure, nasty, bad. I had to look that up because I was thinking something along the divorce adultery, but no. So it's now, according to this state bill, anything with hemp, cannabis, THC will not be considered nasty, bad, or unsafe is kind of the way I took it. So that's a step in the right direction, making cannabis more legit and more normalized. But I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy. This is Bird reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Thanks for tuning in.
Last week, we told you about how some governors are threatening to increase taxes on the cannabis industry to make up for revenue shortfalls in their states. Case in point is Michigan, where their governor, Gretchen Whitmer, used to be a hero for the cause of legalization, but now the industry is going to turn on her faster than you can fill up your bong. Here's our Michigan weedster, Amie Carter, with more from her state.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters, bringing you this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Today, we're focusing on a brewing storm in Michigan's cannabis industry. Michigan's regulated cannabis is facing a significant challenge as Governor Gretchen Whitmer proposes a 32% wholesale tax on recreational marijuana. This tax is part of her budget plan to generate $470 million for road repairs, but industry leaders warn that it could spell disaster for an already struggling market. With cannabis sales dipping for the first time in years and production capacity at its all-time high, operators are concerned that this tax could be the tipping point. Many are already dealing with unsustainable prices and razor-thin margins, and the shift to monthly tax payments could push smaller retailers out of business. The backlash against the proposal is growing, with numerous industry stakeholders expressing their frustration over what they see as betrayal. Many feel blindsided, especially those who supported Whitmer's earlier cannabis reform efforts. The proposed tax hike is particularly worrisome for small businesses and social equity applicants who face the greatest financial strain. To make matters worse, unregulated hemp-derived products are cutting into the market share of licensed operators, creating an uneven playing field. As other states also consider higher excise taxes, Michigan's unique oversupply situation makes it particularly vulnerable. For now, the Michigan cannabis community remains determined to fight back against these new challenges. The struggle to protect this hard-fought industry continues. Stay tuned as we keep you updated on this and more. That's it for this week's Michigan News. I'm Amie Carter with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the A block, or first section of our weekly Cannabis Coast to Coast news report. But next, we go international. We'll check in on what's going on in Europe and tell you about a Central American country that's about to go legal. That and more in our state reports on Cannabis Coast to Coast News coming up next.